You are good to go, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. I would like to call the Committee of a Whole meeting for April 11, 2022 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Russell, Councillor and Chair of the General Business and Finance Committee. We are meeting electronically through Zoom in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act, which provides for electronic participation and the town's procedural bylaw. Members of the public may observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast at our YouTube channel. I will ask our Deputy Clerk to complete a roll call of council so we can confirm quorum. Devan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Regima?
Here.
Councillor Russell?
Here.
Councillor Bernay?
Here.
Councillor McPherson?
Here.
Councillor and Deputy Mayor Micklick?
Here.
Councillor Reimer?
Here.
And Mayor Easton, Councillor Pachariva, and Councillor Timmers all send their regrets. However, we do have quorum, Chair.
Thank you, Devan. In addition, I want to take a moment and welcome the staff we have joining us today electronically. Director of Planning and Development, Matt Bruder. Planner, Allison Martin. Our Director of Economic Development and Communications, Paul Deaney. Our Economic Development Assistant, Cameron Rotz. Director of Community Services, Shannon McKay. Our Director of Public Works, Dave Graham. As well. Legislative Committee Coordinator, Deanna Phillips. And moderating and clerking the meeting today, we have our Manager of Legislative Services and Deputy Clerk, Devan Kripp. IT staff are also in attendance, and also in attendance with us are Regional Councillor Rob Foster, Chandra Sharma, and Kem Kowal from Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. So we are very much welcome our guests. As this is a virtual meeting, I will ask that we follow some procedures during this electronic meeting. Should there be a connection or service disruption for the chair or if quorum is lost, the chair and or deputy clerk will call a 10-minute recess to reconnect and regain quorum. If quorum is lost, the meeting will be adjourned. If connection is lost from the chair, the deputy chair will ask those in attendance to wait for 10 minutes to provide the chair time to reconnect and resume the meeting. Otherwise, after that time frame, the vice chair, Councillor Paul McPherson, will resume the meeting until the chair has reconnected and resumes his role. Each member of council who wishes to speak, press the raise hand feature on your video call, and the deputy clerk will track our speakers list today and then invite you to speak when I open up it for comments or questions. Also, when I finish reading the motion and announcing the mover, the deputy clerk will then call out the vote by reading each member of council's name out loud. Please remember to take yourselves off mute during this portion of the meeting so that you can confirm if you support or oppose. Also, when not speaking, please remember to put yourselves on mute. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none. Do members have any amendments to the order of the agenda? Okay, I see none. There are no statutory public meetings this evening. We will now move on to our consent agenda. We are now considering item 6, the consent agenda, inclusive of item 6.1, the Joint Fire Services Advisory Committee minutes of January 6, 2022, and also item 6.2, the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee minutes of February 3rd, 2022. Would any member of council like to remove an item from the consent agenda to discuss? Oh, Councilor Gemma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about something within the Joint Fire Services Advisory Committee minutes.
Would you like that to be lifted, Councilor Gemma?
Yes,
Or
please.
just a clarification.
It's just it's a minor question. It's not something for a discussion, just a question. If you want me
Deputy
to
Clerk?
Sure, if you'd like to proceed with that, we can go ahead and take that question and then do 2 separate motions to receive and file.
Okay, Councilor Gemma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's reference in the minutes to an RFP being released or has been released, or a time frame about that for the master plan. I'm wondering what stage that's at.
Okay, is that to the deputy clerk or is that to our staff member?
It's a good question. I guess our fire chief is not here tonight, so
yeah. Devan, I see your hand up.
Through you, Chair, thank you. I can take that back to the town clerk and the fire chief, as they are not in attendance today, and get back to you with an answer for that.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you,
You're
Mr.
very
Chair.
welcome.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gemma. So with that question being answered, do we just proceed with the regular motion?
If you're comfortable to do that motion as the two of them together, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik that all items listed under the heading of consent agenda for Monday, April the 11th, 2022 be adopted as recommended. Item 6.1, Joint Fire Services Advisory Committee minutes of January 6, 2022. And item 6.2, the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee minutes of February 3rd, 2022. I will now ask our clerk to call the vote. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Councillor Regima?
Yes.
Councillor Bernay?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Mikulik?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
And Councillor Russell, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Devan. We are now at the general business and finance portion of the agenda. We are now going to handle our delegation. So we're now the delegation portion of the general business finance committee agenda. Our delegation this evening is Chandra Sharma, the CAO, Regional Councillor Rob Foster, the chair, and Ken Kowal, board member, all from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. Prior to proceeding with the delegation, I will ask that council proceed with a majority vote to extend the speaking time. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rick Gemma. The council extends the presentation time until it is completed. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call the vote.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I can do a raise of hands for all those in favor to extend the presentation. Thank you. And all of those opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. Chandra, Ken, and Regional Councillor Rob Foster, please go ahead.
We'll just get your presentation up. Give us one moment.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. Good evening. And as I was introduced, thanks for having me here, CAO of NPCA, to council members and mayor. I didn't see her. I don't know if she's here or not. But before I start, I would like to ask our chair, Chair Foster, and Member Kowal, if they would like to say a few words in introducing this presentation.
Well, I'll start and then Ken can jump in. So first of all, good evening. And you'll notice, councillors, that I'm wearing a jacket. It's because I'm the chair now, so I have to be wearing a jacket when I'm coming to this meeting. So, and it's too bad Sandra isn't here because she would make comment on that. Just the presentation giving tonight is a very good overview of what's going on within Lincoln. Just to remind everybody, of course, that the NPCA covers not only Niagara. We have pieces that are going into Hamilton. 21% of the Hamilton area is covered by NPCA watershed, and as well 25% of Haldeman as well. There's some work that's being done in the background, and I will be able to bring forward some additional information to you shortly. As this goes through the board and as well through the region on composition of the NPCA board going into the next term of council. A lot of work is being done at the CAO level at this particular point in time. So, and I wanted to give a shout out to Ken. Ken and I have been working together, and Ken has been doing a great job representing Lincoln at the NPCA board level, and we have a lot of work that's going to be going on together within the policy area over the course of the next little bit. So I can hopefully turn that over to Ken.
Great, thank you, Rob, and thanks for the kind comments. It's been a challenging year trying to govern an organization in a regulatory environment that's constantly changing. But we've done a really good job. We've worked our way through it. And in fact, you'll see in Chandra's presentation, it's actually created a lot of work for the NPCA. but we've already accomplished a number of really good things. And as Rob indicated, we're in the final stages now of the policy review and update. And I think once that's done by the end of the year, the organization will be in really good shape to hand over to the next board of directors. So I won't take any more time. I'll just pass it over to Chandra and have her take us through the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Foster and Member Kewal. I will ask when the slide needs to be advanced. So I want to start by just making a general comment that NPCA, as has said, has made great progress in rebuilding a strong conservation organization, despite the challenges we faced by pandemic, by everyone. We managed 2021 with some solid deliverables, outcomes, and good fiscal responsibility. We sailed through the pandemic and everybody was safe and sound and serving our parks and maintaining the high level of service standards. Another major change, as Member Kewal said, was the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. It created a lot of work for us, but it continues to be an ongoing priority for NPCA to bring everything in conformity during the transition phase of Conservation Authorities Act. And I have few slides here at the end of the presentation. I wasn't planning on going through it. It's for your information on Conservation Authorities Act. If you have any questions, I'll take those questions after my general presentation. So next slide, please. Oh, sorry, can you go back to the map? I just want to give a little bit of context here. So Township of Lincoln is an extremely important partner for NPCA. As you can see from this map, the red circle, a majority of our land is in Lincoln, 17% of NPCA land with 6 conservation areas, and our flagship property of Balls Falls. They make up approximately 379 hectares of lands. In this portfolio of green infrastructure is available, majority of that is available to communities in Lincoln, free of cost, and includes some of the significant conservation areas like Cave Spring, Jordan Harbor, Louth, Mountain View, and Rockway. Next one, please. So completion of a 10-year strategic plan has been a highlight of our work this year, this past year, led by staff with the committee of the board, and Member Kewal chaired that committee. Our plan is ambitious and progressive while still grounded in reality. I'm most proud of our engagement process and participation of Niagara communities with over 4,300 visitors to our webpage for the strategic plan and 500 visitors directly engaging and participating answers to our surveys and input to our process. Our vision, Nature for All, resonates well with the natural resource management mandate and purpose of furthering conservation, restoration, management, and development of natural resources. And critical to the vision is advancing this vision by creating a common ground for action across our watershed with our municipal partners and a variety of stakeholders. Next slide, please. So this strategic plan charts the course with 6 strategic directions and 21 goals. And each of these goals is supported by measurable actions and key performance indicators. 6 overarching strategies or goals include healthy and climate resilient watersheds, supporting sustainable growth, connecting people to nature, strengthening partnerships, financial sustainability, and organizational excellence. I am particularly proud of the high standard of performance measures we have created, reporting, and the overall framework for this process and reporting on the strategic plan. So with the completion of this plan, we've now launched into an operational and business planning process, which is now aligned with the Conservation Authority Act deliverables as well. And in 2022, we are marching through this by addressing some of the gaps and also building science capacity for the NPCA to support our municipal partners with your technical needs. Next, please. So now I'm going to highlight some of the key aspects of our work and deliverables in 2021 that offer value to Lincoln communities across the town. Next, please. So in terms of our parks, 2021 represented a very, very significant visitation year. 30% increase from 2022 on average across active parks. And through the pandemic, these numbers have gone really up high. Boss Falls alone had 60,000 visitors, and close to 70% of these visitors are local from across our watershed, and remainder visit from GTA communities surrounding Niagara. Next one. So that was for Balls Falls, which is one of our active conservation areas. In terms of passive conservation areas and the other properties, we've also initiated trail trackers. And these are just our way of monitoring the activity through these lands in our passive conservation areas to demonstrate visitation patterns. So within Lincoln, these trackers were deployed at Louth and Rockaway conservation areas. Rockaway remains our most popular conservation areas out of all NPCA passive properties. So in 2021, we observed 64,000 visitors at Rockaway and around 42,250 visitors at Louth. So overall, just shy of 200,000 people took advantage of their local green space here in Lincoln, if you look at Balls Falls and these two areas. So those are pretty good numbers. And we are hoping that with the increased awareness and need for green space, these numbers are only going to go up in the coming years. Next, please. So our education programs are also offering great value to local youth and children. Our summer day camp is very high in demand. Over 130 families registered this past year, and the program was full, and it gets registered pretty quickly. 2021 was also the second year of offering our unique nature school program on popular demand. So we will continue to provide these services to Lincoln communities in the coming months, because now we have proved that these are successful and there's demand for this type of work. Along with that, NPCA is also working on educational strategy or a strategic plan to look at the next 10 years of outdoor education at NPCA. This is one of the deliverables of our strategic plan, and we will be consulting our local municipalities, especially Lincoln, as we delve deeper into that process. Next one, please. So speaking a little bit about our role in integrated watershed management and science, so planning and data updates will be critical in supporting evidence-based decision-making for environmental planning, infrastructure projects, and planning decision across the watershed. As we experience growth and intensification within our municipalities. And we know from the Niagara official plan that our workload is going to be huge in the coming years. We have identified several gaps in data that will need to be addressed in 2022 and future years. And we're working on an extensive program to also monitor our watershed from an ecology perspective going forward. And I'll speak more to it. Next one, please. So as part of our mandate of protecting people and property from natural hazards, as you're aware, 3 major water courses have been fully mapped now. Some of you may have participated in the public info sessions we had. Beamsville, Bartlett Creek, and Prudhome's Creek are now completed. And we are also initiating in the coming years shoreline management plan updates for both Lake Erie and here Lake Ontario. We also manage, as you know, weather forecast. Flood forecasting and warning is an important program of NPCA. We issue flood bulletins via email, social media, and our mobile app. This mobile app we have called Alertable is one of the more advanced ones in Ontario. I think ours is the only conservation and the first conservation authority to have something like that. And it's paying dividends. Like it is really working in areas where people are flood prone. They get messages and they can, we can inform people about the risks. We do monitor water quality across the watersheds. In Lincoln, we have 8 surface water monitoring stations and 1 groundwater monitoring station. Overall, across Niagara, we have 67 surface water stations and 11 groundwater stations. And results from these water quality monitoring reports are posted on our website, and I know it's sent to staff as well through our staff directly. Next one, please. So this map shows current planning and growth areas supported by NPCA planning and permit review functions. As you can note from this graphic on the right, that the number of plan review and planning transactions continue to grow in the region overall. Lincoln applications accounted for about 10% of the reviews within NPCA jurisdiction. Primarily 2 subdivisions we were involved with, Prudhomme Landing and Vista Ridge. Staff continue to work with the staff team at Lincoln and willing to support where we can. I mean, our focus going forward will be in the, as you can see, the gray areas on this map. These are growth areas. We want to be able to proactively analyze and collect subwatershed level and catchment level data for these areas. So when applications come in, growth decisions are made, we can support with the right analysis and data, and do the right technical, provide the right technical input to that process. So to address this, we are investing in several critical science initiatives. First of all, subwatershed studies for our watershed, data analysis, mapping, and technical studies where we need to make these decisions. Setting up monitoring programs, especially on the ecology and biodiversity side of things. Designing restoration priorities for ecosystem enhancements where we can through the planning process, and supporting best management practices like low impact development, green infrastructure, those kinds of things. I know from staff that Lincoln was considered a high priority area for watershed planning way back when they did a gap analysis. So ideally, I think our priority will also be to look at 15, 16, and 18 Mile Creek and 20 Mile Creek, where we can update that data to support you. Next, please. So as you know, we have started or reinstated our restoration program in 2019. It has achieved some big wins across the region and across our jurisdiction in Hamilton as well, and Haldimand, in a very short amount of time. So far, I mean, we hand out or work in partnership with landowners on restoration projects. So far, we have received 57 applications for projects in 2022. 2021 was also around the same amount of applications. And quite a bit, 26%, I think, was from Lincoln. So it's spread across municipalities evenly. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for supporting the RFI we submitted to the federal government for $2 billion tree program under the climate change umbrella. And I think we received very extensive and good support from across Niagara region municipalities. This year, we are launching a capacity building grant. The proposal has gone into federal government. Once we receive that money, it will be invested in developing a very extensive 10-year tree planting program across Niagara watershed, working with all the local and regional municipal partners and looking at a range of opportunities, private land plantings, municipal lands, public land plantings, tree giveaways, agriculture stewardship, all kinds of a range of program. We are also looking at our restoration program and doing a feasibility study as to how we can expand our restoration to do more extensive work in undertaking large scale restoration projects on different type of sites. That work has been initiated. It was initiated last year and scheduled to be completed this year. Next, please. So in terms of community engagement and awareness, we have these, I want to highlight these two big events that we host in the town. Balls Falls have done really well despite the pandemic. The hybrid event, we modified in-person, sorry about that, in-person component and a virtual marketplace, invited 50 vendors online and 80 in-person vendors, 8,000 people with advanced tickets. It was a sold out event. Next year, I mean in 2022, it will be bigger and better. Hopefully we can go back to where we were if things go okay. We're watching. The new holiday trail we have started also seems to be gaining a lot of momentum. This year, we did a free community day for low-income families prior to the public opening, and we had 1,200 attendees that day. A lot of people showed up to take advantage with their children, how we can do that. A lot of community engagement activities also happening at NPCA, and a lot of volunteer opportunities through our community work. Next one, please. I also want to take a brief, provide a brief overview on something that is being spearheaded by our Conservation Foundation. And thanks to Chair Foster, who was leading this project as our representative on the foundation. Now he's the chair, he's ex officio. But basically, there's several capital projects happening. The gallery there's a project going on to upgrade the Balls Falls gallery. Exterior restoration of all historical buildings have been completed. We also upgraded the septic system in 2021. So a lot of critical infrastructure stuff happening all the time to support weddings and other events that happen at Balls Falls and just general visitation. Capital projects for 2022 this year, we are putting a nice parking lot in the Cave Spring conservation area. And this parking lot is being designed with low impact development features. So you will see bioswales surrounding the parking area, catchment area for water or runoff from that parking lot, and nice signage. We're also upgrading the accessible trail at Cave Spring, and historical restoration of Balls Falls home will also be completed in 2022. So next, please. I think that's the end of my presentation. I really want to thank you for having us. The rest of the slides are from Conservation Authorities Act update and regulations, and they're just for your information. I can answer any questions if needed, or if you like, I can go through these slides as well.
Okay, thank you, Chandra. I see Councillor Bernay has already jumped in the queue, but I do want to thank you for the presentation, as long as the comments by Mr. Kowal and Regional Councillor Rob Foster. So I will open up the floor to questions of council. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Bernay, you're the first to bat lead off, so we'll go to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, first of all, thank you for Chandra and Ken and Rob for being here this evening. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, Chandra, at the very end, you spoke about some capital projects that are going to be occurring at Balls Falls. And also you talked about some work at Cave Springs. I remember, and I've lost track of time with COVID, but back, I'm going to say it was when Bill Hodgson was a regional counselor representing Lincoln, and there was an evening at Balls Falls to talk about the master plan work for Cave Springs that was being planned. So you mentioned parking lot, you mentioned trail, you mentioned signage. Where are we with the master plan redevelopment of Cave Springs?
Thank you for that question through you, Chair Russell. So yes, we have a draft Cave Spring master plan. A lot of community input was obtained at the time, and the projects, the accessible trail and the parking lot, are all coming out of that. The plan is still sitting draft because we have to update it with some Niagara Escarpment requirements, Niagara Escarpment Commission requirement, the NEPOS template, they call it. We have put a pause on to that because as part of the Conservation Authority Act, last year, the phase 1 regulations required that the conservation authorities should update, well, first of all, develop a land management strategy to highlight how these various conservation areas managed by Conservation Authority as a mandated activity. The management plan, land inventories for all of these lands will be updated. So we have to put it under that umbrella. So it's now going to be a more comprehensive exercise of looking at all of conservation area parks and updating each of them. Having said that, Cave Spring is at the top of our list. So as and when staff have already started looking into updating sections of that based on the Niagara Escarpment requirement. And towards the end of this year, we will be completing that one plan as part of that broader exercise through Conservation Authority Act requirements.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that response. I have a couple other questions, Chair Russell.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So through you, Chandra, I just, in preparation for tonight's meeting, and believe me, there's no loaded gun here. I'm not, this question is not aimed at anything, but I did take the opportunity to go back and look at the Auditor General's report and the recommendations from their report back in 2018, which I think was then launched in 2019. But when you speak about capital projects, I did see in that report that there was quite a section about how capital projects should be handled by the NPCA.
Oh, we lost him.
You know, the improvement. So from that report, it speaks to 237 capital projects through to 2032 that would be valued at about 45 million. Could you speak to how the NPCA looks at prioritizing those projects?
So I think I get the question, and you're freezing a little bit, but I got bits and pieces. I got the question, and thanks through you, Chair. Thanks for asking that question. So NPCA has done a couple of things, partly as part of the auditor's report, but partly as just good governance. I've been here 2 years, and what we have done is we have a very extensive asset management program. We are the first conservation authority in Ontario. In fact, just 2 weeks back, we presented to Conservation Ontario, and now it's a requirement of Conservation Authority as part of the CA Act, and every conservation authority is looking at NPCA as to how they should do it. So we have a very extensive asset management program. As part of that program, we have an inventory of all of our asset and state of good repair and depreciation and where these projects are, and we have a value associated with that. Every time we also have modules, like technical modules internally for capital planning. So we have an internal committee as part of our governance process, a staff-led committee. Every time during the budget phase, we look at our capital priorities. We come up with a list prioritized by, projects that have the right consultations, that are shovel ready. It's just a standard good governance capital planning process. And we put those projects through our budget. The board approves them, and then they are implemented using board approved procurement policies. We also updated over the past 2 years. Our governance committee was very active putting all these things in place. So we have a very good procurement policy now, which we follow, and all projects are taken through this policy. What we are also planning to do in the coming years, this year actually, starting this year, 10-year capital planning using our asset management program and the capital process we have laid out internally. So we have a pretty good idea of what's coming down the horizon, where we can collaborate with the existing infrastructure projects that might be going on, through our partners. So there's less environmental disruption. Projects on our own conservation areas can be prioritized that, and also gives us a pretty good idea of what our capital needs are in terms of funding, because these things are long-term and we need to plan accordingly. What we also do is prepare an unfunded project list using those priorities for the board. And we're doing it for the past 2 years since I've come on board. And basically, these are projects that we think are important, but we don't have the funding to do them right now. However, board has approved that unfunded list. And if a funding opportunity comes through federal investment or provincial investment, other grants, we can leverage that opportunity and implement that project. And I'm not supposed to announce publicly, but I can tell you we recently were successful in a federal grant. And it's pretty significant to do exactly this type of work and catch up on some of the state of good repair backlog that we have at NPCA.
Councillor Russell, if I can also jump in with that. We've done some very interesting things in and around capital expenditures as well, and I'll use Binbrook Conservation Area as a good example of this. And really the city of Hamilton, because it's their particular area, we do a lot of outreach with them, and then we work with them on the capital projects. They are the key funders of what goes on with some of the key capital things there. And the plan is in the future to be having more in-depth discussions back with Niagara region as well. It's not going to be a carte blanche, we're expecting this amount of money. There will be business cases, et cetera, that are going to be going on, and regional government will have, I guess, an additional view on where we're going with these things. And just to add even to Chandra's comments, both member Kaywall and I have been very actively involved with the governance committee over the last couple of years to get it to where it is as well. It's been a challenge, to say the least.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Chandra. Councillor Burnett, your question did break up a little bit, but did that answer what you were looking for?
Yeah, for the most part it did. And yeah, my internet as usual is a little unstable, but I have one more question. Hopefully it can be heard.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So Chandra, anytime we have a board, it doesn't matter whether it's NPCA, whether it's a utility company, there's always scrutiny as to the makeup of the board. And again, I read in the Attorney General's report about the makeup, whether it be elected officials, whether it be lay people, whether it be people with an agricultural background. I'm looking at, the makeup here tonight. We have one elected official and Ken is a lay person. You guys spoke about changes in the CA Act. How will those changes in the CA Act affect board makeups of the conservation authorities moving forward?
So there were a few through you, Chair Russell, sorry. There are a few changes to the governance of conservation authorities in relation to the board composition and chair positions. So as you know, these changes came into effect in December 2020. I think that's when the governance changes came into play. The first change really is about the composition of the board. And what the province has done is there's a requirement that up to 30% of board members can be community representatives, and up to 70% can be municipally elected representatives. So that's one change, the 70-30 rule. So if the municipality want, they can have, community representatives on the board up to 30% of the board membership. The composition or the numbers of what the municipality can use to appoint members is already enshrined in the Act, and that hasn't changed. So it provides a number of population in a watershed area of a conservation authority and prescribes the number of representatives that that municipality can appoint to the board. So if you have an exemption to that rule, you will now write to the minister and maybe cite reasons why you want this exemption and what is the reason, and the minister may or may not approve that. So in that regard, I think our 3 regional municipalities, and I think the responsibility, how it's described in the Act, partnered municipalities or regional municipalities. So in the case of NPCA, it will be Haldimand, Hamilton, and Niagara region. And what also needs to happen is once they decide what the composition of the board will be, there has to be a formal agreement between the 3 municipalities posted online, which could be a council resolution agreed by all 3 municipalities on the composition of the board. And we will accept what the municipal decision will be and accept those members. The other change that has happened, which you already probably know, is rotation of chair. So the chair from 1 minute, it has to rotate between all 3 municipalities. And a chair can have 2 terms of 1 year each. And after that, it needs to go to another municipalities. And as such, as you know, Brenda Johnson was the chair last 2 years. And now Member Foster from Niagara is our chair. So those are the major changes on board composition. And as Chair Foster said, we've met with the CAOs and clerks of all 3 municipalities and given them the details of the CA Act and the changes that have just been made, and they're working on that. One more change that I should mention is the appointment of an agriculture representative. That has to be appointed by the province, similar to the appointments to the source protection committees. And the province opened up the process, I think a few months back. They may be in the final stages of appointing agriculture representatives to each conservation authority board.
I can add to that as well, Mr. Chair. So the agriculture rep actually has been chosen for Niagara, and that's coming to our next board. And it's a good news for us on that one.
Okay, thank you, Chair Foster and Chandra. Councilor Bernay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. I just through you, Chair, I just wanted to thank all 3 representatives. I don't think it's a stretch for me to say that, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, there probably was a bit of a black cloud hanging over the NPCA a number of years ago. But I think that you guys have definitely turned a corner. And as Ken mentioned, it's been difficult with COVID, but I think the policy changes and all the things that you guys are working on are all very positive. So thank you very much, and good luck with everything.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Bernay. We'll now go to Councilor McPherson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd also like to echo Councilor Bernay's comments to the 3 of you for the work that you've done over the last 3 or 4 years, calming the waters. And no pun intended there, but anything that I'm personally seeing in the media is very positive now, and I think it reflects on the personnel that are there from a staff standpoint and from the board. So I'd also like to thank Ken. You know, we only get one chance a year to really kind of see you, Ken, and thank you. And thank you, Rob. Even though you're a representative of the region, you're a Lincolnite, if you will. And you know, I'm sure you have the best interests of Lincoln at heart when you are representing the region on the MPCA. But to Ken, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of our residents. You know, I know there are a lot of competing interests. Having sat on that board myself, I know there are competing interests, you know, every step of the way. And I can't even tell you how many members there are now. I know there was a change, and I know there's a lot. So, you know, I want to acknowledge you and the work that you've done over the last 4 years now, I guess, on the MPCA, raising your hand for the town of Lincoln. So good on you. My question is with regards to the Jordan Harbor, and you know, in the strategic plan, I'd like to hear what we've got planned specific to the Jordan Harbor. As we all know, it is an area of significant development, and we are starting to certainly hear rumblings from the developer that we are looking at that getting kicked off in the not too distant future. So, you know, I'm interested in hearing about potential investment in that conservation area, if you will. And you know, how we can maximize really that gem of a piece of real estate and lake or harbor, if you will, to take full advantage of what it has to offer, from boating to kayaking to cycling to all of the things that could be happening down in Jordan Harbor, which I think is certainly underutilized today. So I wonder if through you, Mr. Chair, maybe Chandra, or if any of the others have a comment to make specific to where we're going with Jordan Harbor.
Okay, thank you, Councilor McPherson. Any takers?
Do you want me to answer?
Please.
Okay, great. Thanks to you, Councillor Chair Russell. So there's a couple of things I can say. It will be premature for me to exactly say, you know, where I want to see this, but I can tell you the general vision from a strategic planning perspective is to connect more people to nature, optimize our conservation areas, and from a trails perspective, you know, have those linkages. So all of that is there. The direction is in the strategic plan. The second layer is what I just spoke about, the Conservation Authorities Act and the requirement to do management plans for all of our properties. And this will be part of that. The challenge we will have, and I am really excited to hear the opportunities and what's happening around it. And for sure, there's lots can be done there. The challenge we are going to have is with the levy regulations or even the mandatory regulations. The province has made it very clear that any active conservation area where NPCA is doing active management and offering recreation opportunities managed by staff has to be self-sustained. We cannot use municipal levy for those things. The passive stuff is land care and can still be using that. So whatever we plan there as part of our management planning has to be self-sustaining. And we have to look at, you know, balancing the revenue versus the site versus what's the potential and how we can serve the surrounding communities. But I can tell you in the next few years, as we proceed with the management planning for these areas, I'm sure Jordan Harbor will make it to the priority list, you know, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But the opportunities are huge.
Well, thank you for that, Chandra, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I understand that there is a business case that has to be made, and that you know, there is that decision on certainly charging an entrance fee that comes into play, could possibly come into play. You know, I'm hoping that the property gets the effort in the planning process to put you in a place where you could make that decision as to whether or not we need to put a gate up and we need to charge people to come, and what they would be paying for coming in the gate. So that I get where you're coming from. I hope at this point that is tabled at the board level and or at the staff level, and that you go through those discussions. And again, whether or not you get to a place of charging for entry, I think there's also the opportunity for investment in the property, enhancing the property, and not needing employees on the property to manage it, if you will. That building out boardwalks and putting in kayak launches and things like that for people to just go down and enjoy, I think may be what we need right now. So I appreciate your answer, and look forward to where you go with it. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chandra.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. And I see Councillor Mickler with his hand up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Russell. Through you to the members of the NPCA. Thank you for coming again. Just the Jordan Harbor was on my mind, but the question I have in particular is, and does the NPCA have the ability to do joint ventures or partnerships with the private sector? So with, let's say, the Jordan Harbor and what there is there, is it possible for a joint venture or for an RFP amongst the private sector to manage that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Has that been considered?
Yes, our partnerships are considered: partnership with local municipality, regional municipality, private sector partner, keeping in mind, that is why a management plan is so important, so we can stay away from environmentally significant areas, water quality, all those objectives can be met, and then we can look at the recreation portion. Right now, if you look at several of our sites, Binbrook, we have third-party operators running recreation programs in Binbrook, and it's very popular. There are a lot of opportunities, low impact recreation, keeping in mind the environmental impacts of the activity or what is desired in that community. So that option is at the table. Yes, I will not say no to that. Yeah.
Okay,
If I can, through you, Mr. Chair, as well, just to go one step further than that, Councillor Mikulek, a part of what I have been doing as the chair of the NPCA and just my very short time within it, and I know it's continued from before, is working on the partnerships, even with other organizations within Niagara. So the NEC, for instance, we've reached out to them. I had a meeting with the Niagara Parks Commission 2 weeks ago to talk about where things are going with those organizations. And there's a quote unquote climate summit coming up in June, where they're going to be bringing together all of the various organizations, and partnerships are a crucial part of all of this as we're moving along. And if I can also go back to Councillor McPherson's comments, and by the way, thank you, Paul, for all the work that you did during a very trying time. I know when you were on the NPCA, the key focus for us right at the moment within Lincoln, of course, is the Balls Falls Center, and we have the funding in place for the current work and for this upcoming year, and we're doing, and I'm still actually, Chandra was really kind saying I'm not involved. I'm still the chair of the fundraising effort for our major fundraiser on that, and that is a huge tourism draw. We've already identified that as already tourism piece of the puzzle, and it should be music to your ears that we are looking to make that place actually become an even greater jewel in the town's crown. So thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I have another question, or a hope, let's say, with regards to the 20-mile trail that runs from 21st Street or below Jordan Village to Balls Falls. Is there anywhere in the capital projects list or consideration to create a connected trail from, let's say, that staircase down below the museum along, to the new proposed Jordan Park, and then all the way up to possibly Balls Falls? And the reason why I say this is because right now, like we're trying to create a destination there in Jordan Village with the new revitalization of it. And I feel as though it'd be a good day hike for folks to, rather than drive to Balls Falls, to be able to stay at at a local establishment and then actually be able to walk up and hike for the day. So I just wanted to put that out there, if we can consider that and try to advocate to those that we need to advocate for the funding to make such a dream happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miklik. So I take it that will be put on a hope list for down the road. I know with Chair Foster's jacket, fundraising will be much easier with it on than with it off. So again, I think that's definitely a great ask for down the road. Are there any other questions for members of council? Okay, seeing none, I just have a quick question myself. On page 8 of your presentation, where you talked about the day camps, I'm just wondering, again, you did indicate that they were both very, very popular, the Summer Adventure Day Camp and the 2021 Balls Falls Nature School. Wondering if there's any thoughts of expanding the enrollment possibilities there to allow for more youth to take up on those great opportunities.
To you, Chair. It was we were a little limited in the past 2 years with the COVID and pandemic and safety restrictions. So we had to space kids out, even if they were outside, because they eventually come in for lunches, and we have one elegant room and we can spread kids out evenly. But when the COVID restrictions go away, yes, I think, like I said, we're working on an education strategy. And this is not the only site, even, at St. John's Center, that's where the Catholic School Board rents but we have access to those lands. We can still run education programming there. I mean, there's big plans. We're working on an education strategy and see how we can make it bigger and better, because I think it's been proven that outdoor education is such a blessing for kids and children. So we want to look into that and expanding that for sure. Yes, but that's another area. Education is not a mandatory activity according to the province. So it has to be self-sustaining or funded by partners, but we'll see. Yeah, what we can do there. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much for that. I see no other questions, so I want to thank the three of you for attending tonight and giving your presentation and your thoughts. If there's anything future that Lincoln Council, our staff, or any of our residents can do to assist you in your ventures, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. But there being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer that Council receive and file as information the presentation and delegation from Chandra Sharma, Regional Councillor Rob Foster, and Ken Kowal regarding the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority 2021 year in review. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to call out the vote. Devon?
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Regima?
Yes.
Councillor Miklik?
Yes.
Councillor Bernay?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
Night, guys.
Thank you very much.
May
Thank you so
Night.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, we now move on to item 7.2 reports. We have no reports this evening, and there being no additional reports to consider for the GBNF committee agenda. We will now conclude the general business and finance agenda, and we will now rotate and allow Councillor and Chair Tony Bernay to assume the chair at this time for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. Chair Bernay, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Russell. So we are now at Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda. 8.1 delegations. There are no registered delegations this evening for Planning and Economic Development. 8.2 reports. We will now consider item 8.2.1, report PD 17-22, regarding the review of short-term accommodation progress report. Our Director of Planning and Development will speak to the report. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just wanted to extend a couple of words about this report. It is intended to be an update for council on all the work we've done to date. We've heard some general concerns about, regulating short-term accommodations. And when I think even further back, when I think about business licensing, I think about some of the work we also did pertaining to cannabis cultivation and looking at options there. So really, while it started there, it's kind of evolved up until now where we're also looking at a licensing system really to capture both. The object of this report is more on the short-term accommodation piece, but it's being developed concurrently for obvious reasons, just in having the similarities in the overall system and how it's implemented. So a lot of moving parts with this. It's been required that we really take a look at our zoning bylaw and the updates happening there to make sure we're properly defining what a short-term accommodation means. Because really that's the impetus for how we move forward with some of our licensing and monitoring and enforcement from there. We've struck an internal working group where we've got representatives from planning staff. You see Miss Allison Martin here, who's our planner, who's really been working a lot on this and really taken the lead on it from a research and liaison with other municipalities standpoint. We're working with our colleagues in economic development too. And also with Mr. Barkway from a municipal law enforcement point of view. So a lot of things at play, looking at what needs to be done work plan wise. It's quite the scope. It doesn't just stop at, implementing a system. We have to look at other bylaws. I think about some of our most common ones, our noise bylaw, for example, that would need to be updated to accommodate this licensing system. We have to make references to these bylaws. I mentioned our zoning. And then also looking at what we would require, both from, at an intake perspective, what we would need to consider a business licensing application, and also looking at what would go into monitoring, and then if required enforcement, knowing now with a business licensing system coming online, the enforcement approach changes and evolves a little bit more. Now we've got an actual licensing system and conditions where we have to more closely monitor and make sure they're being adhered to. So there's a little bit more of an added layer in that regard as well. So I just wanted to provide those opening comments. As I mentioned, you have Miss Martin here, who's been, her mind's really been in it. She's been doing a lot of the legwork from a planning and review point of view. And then obviously Director Deanne too, from an economic development standpoint. So thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Bruder. Do members of council have any questions about this progress report? Councillor McPherson, please go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everybody for putting this report together, all those that were involved, and thank you for giving us sort of a point in time look at the short-term accommodation situation. So I got to be honest with you, going through this report, the first question that came to me was, is this something we really want to do? It appears as though, we've got much of the short-term accommodation, I would say traditional short-term accommodation, covered as I read the report in the bylaws that we've got today. The bed and breakfasts, the inns, the hotels, whatever have you, and I probably haven't got this completely straight, but I'm thinking this is somebody that purchases a unit at one of our high-rise buildings and puts it on Airbnb, and now they've got short-term accommodation available. So when I looked at all of the pros and cons and all that, you laid it out quite nicely. And I looked at the investment that the town is going to have to make to regulate this STAs. I really question, or I guess I start to question, why? You know, what is driving us to have this in place? And the only thing I could come up with, or I guess maybe the leading thing, was that, you know, somewhere down the road we may look at a accommodation tax. And okay, I get that. And that the accommodation tax would apply obviously to all of the aforementioned bed and breakfast, inns and hotels, and that if we didn't have STAs included, it'd be a problem. It would be a problem. But you know, I guess my first thought is, well, why don't we just do them simultaneous? You know, why don't we do them at the same time, so that the revenue generated is going to pay for the investment that the town has to make? I mean, if we're thinking about adding 2 people to bylaw, I mean, to me, I'm guessing that'd be 150 grand right there, you know, all in compensation, benefits, everything. So, you know, it really, at the end of the report, I just sat there and thought, where are we going with this? And why are we doing it? I mean, we don't know. We don't have any idea how many STAs are out there. Or I guess there were 71 that were indicated, but 71 really is nothing, you know, in the whole scheme of things. How many are coming, I guess, is what we don't know. But I guess the question I would have is, what is the team thinking as far as how many are we having? Are we expecting to have, you know, a couple of years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? How many of these STAs are we needed to regulate? So all of that blurb that I just threw out there at you are just some thoughts around the report and thoughts around the whole idea of this bylaw. And really, what is the town taking on from a liability standpoint, you know, in having to govern, you know, how these accommodations are looking, their cleanliness, you know, it just like blew me away. It's like, wow, you know, is this really what we want to get ourselves into? So let me get it back to the simple question is, what does the team think we're going to have 2 or 5 years down the road? What's that 71 number going to become?
Thank you, Councillor. I was hoping to direct most of the questions through to Allison because she is the planner that wrote this report, but I'm going to send this question back to our Director of Planning, Mr. Bruder. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A little bit to unpack there, and maybe I'll turn to Director Deaney to talk a little bit about, you know, what the expectation could be in terms of this industry and what we could see. But a couple of things, a couple of points I wanted to make, drawing out of your comments, Councillor, which are all good ones, was, you know, yeah, I understand where you're coming from with respect to some of the investment implications. Obviously here, you know, the objective is with the licensing fee too, there's a manner of cost recovery that goes into that. You know, we did mention 2 full-time officers in the report. We wanted to be kind of eyes wide open in terms of what it could be eventually, but you know, we're still in the relatively early stages of this. There's an opportunity to kind of ease our way into it in terms of what the needs will be and adjust accordingly. I can tell you, even from a software standpoint, we've kind of been looking at, yeah, ultimately, you know, there are a lot of licensing softwares and things we can utilize out there, but in the interim, we will probably take a little bit more of a measured approach and use the resources already available to us. So there's opportunities there to kind of mitigate some of that, at least at the outset, but just knowing that, you know, there might be incremental steps leading up to the ultimate, what we kind of outlined here at a high level. But in terms of why we need it, you know, this is one of those situations where it was staff's opinion. You know, we heard from council a little bit earlier on, or a while back now, on, you know, some of the general concerns on these, the appetite for looking at them a little more carefully, because, you know, they can tend to kind of pop up, and then we don't, you know, really hear about them until they cause an issue. Here, you know, it provides a better system for them to come to us at the forefront. This is a requirement right away. And also, through issuing of licenses, it really gives us an opportunity to take into account some of the site-specific circumstances that could arise from some of these that come up. You know, some issues pertaining to a particular neighborhood. Maybe it's a more compact build form. Maybe there's other sensitivities that you can't apply with a broad brush that sometimes you do with zoning provisions, that maybe we want to hone in on a little bit here. It gives us an opportunity to do that and kind of tailor and shape our enforcement a little bit further. So that was kind of some of the thinking from our standpoint in terms of what the need is or could be. But again, I'll defer to Director Deanne for some more comments on what we can expect to see in the industry.
Thank you, Mr. Bruder and Chair Brunet, through you to the councillor. So councillor, good question, and a little bit difficult to answer in the sense that it'll be hard to sort of know how many short-term accommodations we're going to have in the future. You know, just recently, council approved the new destination development, or sorry, new destination marketing brand for the town of Lincoln via the Niagara Benchlands. We're going to be promoting that as much as possible to help increase visitation to our community. And our short-term and our tourism strategy definitely identified the lack of accommodations in our community. So currently, I think our number sits at 71 or 77 in the 70s number. And the goal is to really attract more. And once you start to attract more and you bring more visitation in the community, at the end of the day, we're probably going to see more accommodations opening up in the town of Lincoln. And we're hearing a lot from our winery partners and our community about investing in more STAs on their property. So I envision that number growing. And when it comes to a municipal accommodation tax, it is a necessity under the Municipal Act that the short-term accommodations be licensed and registered before you can start to apply that tax. And as you can see in the report, I know our traditional accommodations, whether they're hotels or bed and breakfasts, if they were to sort of buy into the municipal accommodation tax, they would want to see a fair playing field when it comes to that tax being spread across all accommodation partners in our community. And so, you know, economic development staff are supportive because the MAT tax will help support destination development and promotion, thereby bringing more people into our community. So I hope that answered your question, Councilor.
Well, thank you to both of you for your answers, and I certainly know it's no easy answer. I guess if I have a comment to make, I'd look at, I mean, there's a much bigger picture here that you're talking about. It's not just STAs. It's the whole tax piece that I think is a broader discussion of whether or not we bring that in. I would say that anything we're doing from an investment standpoint in these STAs, we need to recover. So, you know, if we're thinking about adding people to this, we need to recover for those people. So just to have this STA out there, and it's another burden on our taxpayers, I can't support that. So we need to have a greater plan of the timing of you know, when this or the whole discussion around a potential tax and where are we going with that. And also, you know, I think there does need to be a greater discussion about defining, as you say in the report, defining the STAs in more detail, as well as defining the role of the town in monitoring those. I mean, you touch on it, but it really doesn't get into, you know, what would a bylaw officer, if you will, be responsible for day in and day out for these short-term accommodations. So thank you, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rinjima, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report. I have a question about Well, I want to talk about the benefits. On page 3, it says, page 3 of the PDF, it says that there's a number of benefits to allowing short-term accommodations within the town, and there's some listed there. And I think we're already allowing them in the town because I don't think that we have anything on our zoning bylaw that specifically prohibits them. So we are kind of allowing them. And what we're doing here is coming up with zoning regulations and definitions so we can direct them to certain areas, and also establishing a licensing system to regulate them. So I make that distinction just sort of as a precursor to what I'm about to say, which is that there's another benefit that I see to establishing zoning regulations and licensing short-term accommodations. And that is in the cases where a property owner's deciding what's more beneficial to them, either renting out their property on a long-term basis to a permanent tenant, or using it as a short-term accommodation rental, either on weekends or a week at a time, or several weeks at a time, or all through the summer season to different tenants. In some situations, short-term accommodations can be more profitable, and I would think therefore more desirable over renting an apartment to a permanent tenant all year round. Not always though, there's inconvenience associated with having to constantly rent out a unit and clean it, etc. But I see all this to say that what we're doing today, hopefully, if it is in fact the case that vacation rental units are threatening to gobble up some of our residential permanent resident or rental units, if you will, then I think that we have to take that into consideration when we make these decisions. I think it would make sense for us to, you know, as Matt said, there's a lot of moving parts, and I think it would make sense for us to have a chart in which it's laid out how the decisions that we're making as a council under our goal to increasing rental housing compares to how the decisions that we're making as a council to regulate but also encourage short-term accommodations, something we know that we want and need in our community, how they work against each other or with each other. I think that would help us to make sure that we're making balanced decisions between the two, because there is a conflict and tension between the two uses, yet we need both for many ways and for different reasons. But then to confuse the matter a little bit further, short-term accommodations can also be useful to provide rental accommodations for seasonal workers. So I would think that would have to be taken into consideration too. So I don't think we can look at rental housing in a vacuum, nor can we look at short-term accommodations in a vacuum. They have to be considered together. And that's, again, part of those moving parts that Matt was talking about. Would it be possible to provide a comparison between the two for the next time we consider this?
Okay, Councillor Rinjima, I'm going to direct that to Allison. Allison, do you want to take a stab at that?
Of course, thank you through you, Chair. I appreciate the comments, and it's definitely something we can bring forward in the future before we move forward to public consultation.
Thank you. I know Director of Special Projects, Kathleen Dale, has a lot of information about housing that would help, and then some of the initiatives that the Housing Committee has taken and the task force before that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Russell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before my question, I just want to make a quick comment to Councillor McPherson's question about the direction from the report. So again, as one of the co-authors of the motion that prefaced this report, I think from my perspective, one of the intents was to be proactive and start to look at some controls we could have in place for when some of our intensification and more compact builds are built and for the residents that are going to be living there long term. Having some control over what may be an investment property as a short-term accommodation in those buildings was something that we wanted to make sure that we had in place prior to them being built, or at least as close to when they are move-in ready, just so that they may have peace of mind that their neighbors, their floor mates, they know who they are, and there is some form of either regulation or restriction on anybody who's coming in and going on a short-term basis. I think one of the other things that we were looking at too was for any investors that are out there that are looking at buying up some of those units as an investment property to have on the market in an unregulated Airbnb format. This would, if we brought in some controls, it may deter that type of activity, which would then, again, to Councillor Gemma's question about housing stock for low-income individuals or people of the like, that there are more units available for people that are going to be living in them as opposed to being rental properties. Or being short-term rental properties. Obviously, long-term rental properties is something that we do want to strive for. But those were two of the big considerations from my standpoint of why we wanted to bring some form of regulation in on that market to protect those two things. But my question through you, Chair, to either to Allison or to Mr. Bruder, as far as the definitions go of our current B&Bs, that again, they wouldn't fall under the STAs as I read it. How current is our definition of what is currently in our marketplace right now? Is it pretty accurate? Because I had a call from an Airbnb, sorry, a B&B owner that he didn't necessarily fall into what the specific definition was, but he's been operating as a B&B. So is that definition accurate, or are we going to be looking at that definition to make sure that our current stock of B&Bs aren't going to be hindered or restricted by this new bylaw should it come forward down the road?
Thank you, Councillor. Allison, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I might direct this to Mr. Bruder to provide an answer.
Okay, Matt.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's a good question, Councillor. As it stands right now, what we have right now in our zoning is definitely antiquated. You know, it just talks about bed and breakfast establishments. It talks about, you know, generally 6 rooms and the proprietor has to live there, which is all fine and good, but it really doesn't reflect some of the, in my opinion, some of the more urban situations of some of these Airbnbs too. You know, we talk a little bit more in terms of, you know, how they function in our definition. You know, yes, it has to be the principal dwelling, but it's up to a 28-day threshold. Some municipalities we've seen to put in size thresholds right away, right in zoning. So there, I think really it needs to be refined. Right now, we really don't have a good definition for it. We've just tacked it on to our bed and breakfast establishment provisions. So in my opinion, moving forward with this kind of distinction with Airbnbs wouldn't hinder the already existing, you know, bed and breakfast and things like that. It would be considered a little bit different.
Thank you for that. One follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so through you to probably Mr. Bruder again. So will there be some consultation with our existing B&B marketplace owners, just so that we can gather all that information, gather that input before coming back with the final iteration of what that bylaw will be?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. I would consider them obviously to be a core group of stakeholders that we need to involve in this. Typically, you know, when we go through consultations for things like this, you know, you've got your group of stakeholders and then you've got your general public session. Sometimes we do them both separately, but, you know, for either or and both, we would be inviting all of the operators that we know of. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Because again, when we brought the motion forward, I know that one of the tenets that we wanted to make sure was installed was that we weren't going to hurt or harm any of those existing businesses that, again, as we all know, are crucial for our tourism environment and going forward, because we know that they have great relationships with all the tourist destinations in town, but also, again, long term, they are part of what makes us the fabric that we are. So I appreciate that feedback. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Michalak, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Brunei, through you to staff. And, I share the same sentiments that Councillor Russell brought forward. I'm reading a CBC article that was yesterday that many municipalities in Ontario are currently looking this as a preventative medicine. I mean, to wait until you need it might be too late. So I think it's important for us to be looking at it now when there may be the opinion of some that, you know, it's not necessary. So those are my comments. And also, like, when you go and you take a look at these Airbnbs that are currently out there, is there anything from glamping, from tents at a campground to trailers in somebody's driveway? I don't, do we have currently, do we have any provisions? Like where's the septic? Where's the bathroom provisions for somebody that's glamping? Right now, we don't know. It's just whatever the owner of the tent determines. Yeah, it's over by that tree. There's a roll of toilet paper hanging, off a nail. So I think we need a little more structure to what accommodations look like. And same thing with, trailers in somebody's driveway because, there's nowhere else to stay. Some law and order, I think, would be in order as far as that goes. The other thing, with regards to licensing and regulating these things, right now, if people are operating in contravention to our bylaws currently, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to go through a process, issue orders, and go through a court system, that sort of thing. If we license, are we able to issue fines through the AMP system? Through you to Mr. Bruder.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some good points for sure. I especially, I can appreciate your point about having a little bit more structure. Like, for example, in a definition for short-term accommodation that we'd look at, we'd be looking at precluding any, detached structures or trailers, if you will, from having these types of accommodations within them. It'd be really in the principal structure. But on the fines and some of the questions you asked around that, yeah, typically right now, if they're in, especially when it comes to zoning non-compliance, there are a bunch of kind of steps in the process to gain compliance. There is an order process. Generally, if you ever find yourself before the court system, you have to be able to demonstrate that you've provided ample time for the solution to be arrived at amicably. You have to provide the property owner with the opportunity to correct it, which when it comes to zoning can take time. If you go through a licensing framework, you're right, there's a little bit more capacity to deal with things on a more nimble basis, if you will. There is a fine structure that can be applied. And really, if they're not adhering to the conditions of the business license, fining them is one thing. You can also just remove the business license altogether, which opens up a host of other potential enforcement options should issues occur. So more control, more structure, absolutely.
And this is what I'm getting at, because there is a fella that I know that has an Airbnb in Niagara on the Lake, and he was late getting his license, and they were pretty quick to slap him with $1,000 fine, and he paid it. And I thought, wow, okay. And he said he had to pay it, and I think that most people in Niagara on the Lake are paying their fines or are conforming to what they are hoping to achieve or see, whether it's right or wrong, the way they do it. I'm hoping staff will review that and see what's good and what's not good. Those are my thoughts on that. And then one more question, my third one is with regards to the Appendix B. Appendix B, there is some revenue generated chart. There's a whole hundreds of thousands, and what was the source of that data? Where did this chart come from?
Mr. Deaney?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the councillor. So that's actually from a software called Air DNA. So it's actually an application platform that basically looks across the municipality, looks at the Airbnbs and what they're listed for in terms of the per night rate, and it aggregates it and provides that data. So we actually, through our partnership with the Tourism Partnership of Niagara, so the regional tourism organization for Niagara, they subscribe to this data, and they're actually free of charge provided that information to the municipality. So again, it's a software that really looks at what the listings are and aggregates that data and puts it into a nice document and provided it to us.
Okay, thank you. I saw those numbers. I wasn't sure if it was projections. I wasn't sure if it was actual. I wasn't sure. I just appreciate that clarification. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you for all the questions. So I'll just I'll just ask a few. I agree with a number of the comments that have been made, especially at the beginning, Councillor McPherson. It was one of my takeaways, is that if we're going to look at this, we need to be able to recapture whatever investment, whatever costs we're going to be incurred, and to look at having 2 full-time bylaw officers. That seemed to me to be a huge commitment, and I just don't know what the source of income is here. That was my concern. As Councillor Russell indicated, I did receive a couple of calls from a couple of people. I think the definition is very, very important, because there are, some businesses that are operating right now. They don't consider themselves to be Airbnbs per se. They're not serving breakfast. They're serving, accommodation, but they're promoting local businesses, bakeries, wineries, and they're bringing revenue into our municipality. And quite honestly, based on some of the comments in this report, they would be in jeopardy to go forward. So I think it's really, really important that we either look at some sort of grandfather clause, or we make sure we define this, because that number of 71 would erode very quickly with the number of businesses that are already operating in the town of Lincoln, from what I'm understanding in talking to a few people over the last few days. I certainly agree with, all the provisions that are in there in terms of ESA and fire inspections and guest limits. I think when we look at a maximum amount of days stayed, I think the report said 28 days. I think under normal circumstances that might work, but I can tell you that during COVID over the last 2 years, because a number of people that have run into problems with their house being built and being delayed and materials being delayed, there have been people that have been staying in short-term accommodations for longer than 28 days because they didn't have any other place to go. So I think there needs to be a look at this through a wider lens. I think under normal situations, maybe 28 days might work. But over the last 2 years during COVID, that would have been problematic for a number of these operators, from what I'm understanding. So appreciate the report. Seeing no further discussion, no other questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell that council receive for information report PD-17-22 regarding the short-term accommodation progress report, and that council direct staff to bring the proposed zoning provisions and licensing framework forward for public and council input. And I will now ask our clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Micklick,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Regima,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. We will now consider item 8.2.2, Lincoln's Economic Development Strategy Update, Pathway to Prosperity, AD-08-22. Our Director of Economic Development and Communications and our Economic Development Assistant will now provide a presentation. Paul and Cameron, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Brunei, and good evening, members of council. So Deputy Clerk, if you'd like, you can go to the next slide, please. So Economic Development is pleased to be here this evening to present to committee an update on the activities we have undertaken to execute the approved economic development strategy. So as members of council will recall, the 5-year economic development strategy and action plan was adopted by council in late 2018 to act as a guiding document to help us achieve economic growth and prosperity for our community. The strategy laid out key roles and activities to drive results and help staff put together an economic development role and function here at the town of Lincoln, the first of its kind. Given that we are over halfway through the strategy, staff felt it was prudent to report back on our activities to date. So as you can imagine, Chair and committee, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to modify and shift focus. However, thankfully, we've had the strategy in place as a useful guiding document to support our business community throughout the pandemic. We've been lucky to emerge stronger and arguably more resilient as well. So both Mr. Rotz and I will be presenting a few highlights from the report and the attached appendices that encapsulate the best of what we've been able to achieve. Next slide, Madam Clerk. So Chair, as Council recall, our economic development strategy did a deep dive into what are the best avenues for economic growth and job creation in our community. So no surprise to anyone on this call this evening, given that we are a Greenbelt community and have some of the best of Ontario's best and greatest wines and wineries right here in our community. Tourism and value-added agriculture revolving around our craft beverage manufacturing sector continues to represent one of our greatest opportunities for economic success. So in 2020, staff completed our tourism strategy and action plan that details how we can build upon the unique tourism sector we have in Lincoln to establish ourselves as a top tourism destination in Ontario and arguably throughout Canada as well. So this strategy lays out several key action items which staff are executing on. So including the launching of our brand new destination branding, the Niagara Benchlands. In addition, as Council can recall, business retention expansion is a key element of what we do here at Town Hall. So supporting our existing businesses to help them grow and create jobs is an important function of how we create economic prosperity here in Lincoln. We know that anywhere between 80 and 90% of new jobs created in a community comes from existing businesses. And that's why we focus on supporting and growing these existing businesses, and it is a large component of what we do. So shoplincoln.ca helped us support businesses throughout the pandemic, as it allowed us to promote our economy and encourage local shopping throughout the various waves of public health restrictions over the past couple of years, thereby allowing our businesses to continue to operate and continue to stay in business. Being open for business is not just a fancy tagline, as you can imagine, it's something that we embodied throughout the pandemic. So, Mr. Chair, if I can, I'd like to turn over to Mr. Ross to take us through the next few slides.
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, members of council. As Paul just stated there, business retention and expansion, we believe, well, it's said that growth comes from about 80% of growth comes from existing businesses, but here in Lincoln, we kind of believe that's more closer to 9%. And next slide too, please, Deputy Clerk. Thank you. So as I said, we believe this is closer to 90% from existing businesses. So it's important for us to continue to communicate with our local businesses, as well as just keep up communications. So through structured BR&E calling programs, as council will recall, back in 2019, staff and council conducted the Business Walks program to grow relationships with local business stakeholders. And when the pandemic hit in 2020 and in 2021, staff proactively reached out to these businesses to ensure that they were up to date on the provincial guidelines, public health restrictions, because as you know, these were changing measures that businesses had to adapt to on an ongoing basis. And we wanted to ensure that our businesses were operating their establishments safely and correctly to follow all public health guidelines and restrictions. Another thing too is we wanted that was outlined in our economic development strategy was to extend our communication with existing businesses. By doing so, we adopted our business e-newsletter, and to date we have actually sent out a total of 96, almost reaching the century mark for business e-newsletters. We also created a series of tourism and economic development week videos to showcase tourism in Lincoln's key sectors. As well as we launched shoplincoln.ca and Niagara Benchlands and social media channels to continue to engage our local businesses through social media, as well as promote their products through these social media platforms. We also adopted our newly adopted annual business review, and as council is aware, we presented this earlier in March, and we really wanted to showcase some of the great activities that we've done over the past year. And it's something we're going to continue to promote in the upcoming years. And we also wanted to showcase some of the amazing success stories that we saw in Lincoln in 2021. And last but certainly not least, we incorporated economic development and tourism activities into our corporate news channels, i.e. our media releases, social media, etc. Next slide, please. So another focus of the strategy was that of talent and workforce development and innovation and leadership. And as council is aware, back in 2019, with the support of Spark Niagara and Spark Lincoln, staff established Ontario's first ever Agritech hackathon to support agriculture, horticulture, and our ecotourism sectors. Now, like most things in 2020, this event was pushed to run virtually, and the hackathon turned into a completely virtual event. But by doing so, we were actually able to double our attendance, as well as make the event worldwide, where we actually had participants from across 22 different countries. And as council is aware, back in 2021, our partnership with Spark Lincoln transitioned into our partnership today with Civic Connect, which brings us into our Youth Skills Studio. And you've heard Paul and myself mention this many times before. We received 2.1 million from the province's Skills Development Fund in partnership with Civica to develop Youth Skills Studio. The goal of Youth Skills Studio programming is twofold. First, it aims to attract and retain Lincoln and Niagara youth looking to gain skills in digital marketing, IT administration, and web development. As well, it provides support to our local businesses by providing access to resources to help build their business online and grow their online presence and adopt online technologies. As we look into the future of talent and workforce development in Lincoln, we hope to share some exciting news about phase 2 of the Youth Skills Studio coming shortly. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Cameron, and members of council. So another key element of our business retention expansion efforts, which also directly aligned with supporting businesses throughout the pandemic, was the advocating for and securing of over $500,000 to support our tourism hospitality sector here in Lincoln. So staff went after and secured this money to help offset the cost of the pandemic. And this money went towards such items as patio expansions, PPE purchases, signage, and more to ensure businesses were able to operate in a safe and welcoming manner over the past couple of years. In addition, in 2019, Council adopted the Industrial and Rural Area CIP to help attract new investment into our community. Directly aligning our CIPs with our investment attraction activities helped us secure investment into the craft beverage sector, such as the expansion that is currently underway at Bench Brewing as it relates to their event space at the Old St. Helens Church. Staff continue to use the CIP as a great tool to help secure private sector investment here in Lincoln, not only from our existing businesses in the case of Bench Brewing, but also in terms of new craft beverage manufacturing and new businesses coming into our industrial park and such. With that, Cameron, back over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. So as previously mentioned, many of our outlined activities were replaced by other initiatives to really support businesses from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we heard time in and time out from our structured calls and continued discussions with businesses, support for selling products online, as well as access to reliable high-speed internet, were one of the biggest concerns to many of our local businesses across the community. And for those reasons, even though we did launch our digital service squad back in 2019, before the pandemic hit, the need and the resources for the digital service squad really grew exponentially when the pandemic hit, because many of our businesses needed to sell their products online, offer their services at curbside pickup, and really communicate out to visitors and residents alike of what they have available and what's to offer. So through this program, we actually helped over 100 businesses in one way or another, and we were able to circulate $95,000 through the program's digital transformation grant to help build businesses online stores or help them with online marketing, etc. And also, as council is aware, we've presented numerous times before. We have been doing our part to help support broadband infrastructure investment here in Lincoln. We have supported multiple funding applications from internet service providers to bring broadband investment here. We also created our broadband survey, which was completed by approximately 350 residents and businesses to showcase underserviced areas. We've circulated the survey results to numerous ISPs, all our contacts, to really help guide decision-making on broadband connectivity here in Lincoln. Moreover, as well, staff have advocated for broadband support at the annual ROMA and AMO conferences over the past year. Next slide, please. And thank you, members of council, and we look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Cameron. Do members of council have any questions? Deputy Clerk, I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, there is Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd be remiss if, again, we didn't extend our thanks, my personal thanks for all you've done through a very difficult time. This TUSM and your supporting staff, have been a huge help to our local businesses over the last 24 months. And I know it's taken a lot of your focus to really respond to that. And even then, obviously, with tonight's presentation, you've chipped away at the strategic plan and have really got a lot of things going in various areas, such as tourism. So kudos to Paul and Cam for what you do. And I guess if there is a question, it's that we are probably heading into a update of the overall strategy, I would guess, next year. And is that in your sights?
Mr. Deaney?
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the councillor. So great question, Councillor. We know our economic development strategy, which is a 5-year strategy, does take us to the end of 2023. Continuing this program and retooling it for a new strategy is definitely on our radar. What I'm going to suggest is we're probably going to take a little bit more of a mature approach to the development of a new economic development strategy. And when I say that, I mean that we've started and built together an economic program, and what we're going to be looking to do is kick it into a little bit of a high gear to help support economic development here in our community and focus in on really our core strengths and what we can do to best grow our economy. So it's a great question. It's definitely on our radar, and we look forward to coming back later next year to start that process.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. So I would echo Councillor McPherson's comments as Chair of Economic Planning and Economic Development. I see the work that you guys are doing firsthand, along with Brittany and Liliana, and I do appreciate it. And I just would make mention that I had the opportunity, along with Councillor McPherson, I believe, I'm not sure if there was anyone else. If I'm missing anyone, I apologize. But last week was the Economic Development, the EDCO conference that brings economic development people across together across the province. This year, it was a bit of a hybrid model. It's been virtual for the last couple of years, but this year there were people present at the hotel in Toronto. We chose to participate virtually. And as part of that, our Lincoln team, along with Kayleen from Civic Connect and the Youth Skill Studios, actually put on a presentation for all of EDCO. And I can tell you it was fabulous. And Paul, I would ask that if that link is available for council, if you could share it so that at their leisure, they could read that or see that and watch it, because in my mind, in my estimation, it's top notch. Kayleen, the work that she's done along with you guys working collaboratively, it was fabulous. And to hear some of the comments directly from the youth that are participating in those programs, it was really, really an eye-opener to hear how this program has helped them, get up the ladder. So if that is shareable to council, I think it would be well worthwhile to watch.
Thank you, Chair Bernay, and we'll definitely share that. We can make sure it's uploaded and shared with the members of council. And I appreciate you highlighting that presentation. It was very well received from the EDCO community. We're doing some great work with Youth Skill Studio, and we obviously look forward to coming back to council at a later date, talking about what round 2 looks like. But we'll save that for another conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson that council receive for information report AD-08-22 regarding Lincoln's economic development strategy update, pathway to prosperity. And I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miklik?
Yes.
Councillor Rajima?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. So we are now at item number 9 on the agenda, confidential items. We have no confidential items this evening. Committee remarks. Do we have any committee remarks? Councillor McPherson.
Just very quickly, Mr. Chair, and on the topic of open for business, we had the opportunity this afternoon. Councilor Reimer invited Councilor Mikulik and I to visit a large greenhouse operation out in Jordan. And when asked of the owner how the relations were, how the transactions went down with the town, he was very, very complimentary. And that would include the planning department, the public works department. And I don't know if he really got much into the economic development department, but it was really great to hear that, the efforts of our town staff to make life as quick and painless as they can for these businesses that are making, in many cases, significant investments in new infrastructure, obviously new greenhouses in this particular case, and are putting, in many cases, life savings into these operations, because many of our businesses are family owned. So it was a great response, and good to hear that it's working, and that there is an overall, and I think we know that there's an overall effort at Town Hall to work as closely as we can with local businesses, and as I say, make life as painless and as easy as we can for them. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? I would just quickly make a comment as as member of the advisory committee for the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. There is a lot of work happening behind the scenes. Unfortunately, we're in a bit of a holding pattern with the election that's occurring in June. The writ is probably coming down on May the 4th. So there is a lot of work going on to have a groundbreaking ceremony take place prior to the writ dropping on May the 4th. So it leaves us a very, very, very short window. There's a lot of work going on with Infrastructure Ontario and the general contractor. So hopefully there will be an announcement and we can have as many people at that groundbreaking ceremony as possible. So just thought I'd mention that. Stay tuned. There's a pretty short window between now and then. So seeing no other comments, there being no further business, I call this a meeting adjourned at 7:52.